Now we're going to transition just a few minutes late here to our next panel, which is about broadband grant opportunities and funding opportunities that are on the horizon. So with us today, we have Janae Delk, who is the Executive Director and Tribal Liaison at CERB, Community Economic Revitalization Board, which you've heard several people mention as a partner agency. And we also have Ann Campbell, who's from the Washington State Broadband Office, who will be talking about their programs as well as the Public Works Board program. And we also have Mr. Andrew Henshaw from Learn, Design, Apply, and he's going to be giving us some sage advice on grant solutions and how to write an effective grant. So Janae is going to be kicking us off today. So I will hand it over to her. Thank you so much for joining us, Janae.
Yeah, thank you. Let me see if I can share my screen here. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we've got it.
Awesome. Okay, so again, I'm Janae Delk. I'm the Executive Director and Tribal Liaison for the Washington State Community Economic Revitalization Board. So I'm just going to get a really quick overview of who CERB is and what we do for funding in general, but with a focus on broadband, because we do a lot more than just broadband, but broadband's across the board for everything. So who's CERB? CERB was created in 1982 to invest in public infrastructure that supported private job creation. CERB is a 20-member independent rural policy-making board that meets 6 times per year and is designed to respond to immediate business needs for siting and expansion, and is now for broadband connectivity. The board is comprised of small and large business members across the state, representatives from ports, counties, cities, tribal, public, and an economist, as well as 4 legislative members, 2 from each chamber, and then state agencies for advisory roles from Employment Security, Department of Revenue, Department of Transportation, and Department of Revenue. CERB is different than other funders. We are not a competitive funder. We actually work with our communities, which I'll get into more about doing project development and funding the right project at the right time for those communities. So our board actually funds projects throughout the year. And we are primarily a revolving loan fund. However, we have been doing grants for our broadband funding through federal funding this biennium. And CERB staff is housed within the Department of Commerce, though CERB is its own state agency. So as you can see here, CERB is designed to finance public infrastructure construction to support private business development, finance public broadband infrastructure to provide high-speed open access service for rural underserved communities, and also assist local governments with economic development and broadband planning. And we do that through our 4 administered programs, our planning program, which does economic development and broadband. Planning is our grants, and then our construction programs are primarily loans with limited grants available. So as I mentioned, we have planning for economic development and broadband, and then our rural broadband program, planning has been completed and project is deemed feasible. Project is in a rural county or community, and then a project is in an unserved or underserved area, and project has a committed ISP. And so for a rural county is pretty simple. A rural community is any town under 20,000 in an urban county and all federally recognized tribes. And currently we consider unserved is a community that has 100/20 megabytes per second, and underserved is they have 100/20, but they don't have up to 300/70. And then these are all the activities under the other programs that we can fund, but highlighted broadband and telecommunications. So our rural broadband program, the purpose is to drive job creation, promote innovation, and expand markets for local businesses, to serve the ongoing and growing needs of local education systems, healthcare systems, public safety systems, industries, businesses, and governmental operations and citizens. And ultimately, that just means to improve accessibility for all underserved communities and populations. Eligible jurisdictions, pretty much all local governments and federally recognized tribes in the state of Washington can apply to CERB. Under quasi-municipal, that could be a school district, that could be a fire district, library district. So pretty much anybody out there who would want to do it could do it with CERB if they fit the other requirements. And then, so our rural broadband program started in 2018. And since then we've invested $37.8 million. We've been matched with 23 million from our local governments and tribes. This is an estimated connection of over 21,000 connections and a cost per connection based on CERB's investment of $1,793. Of those 21,000 connections, over 19,000 of those are household connections that facilitate virtual education, e-commerce, telework, and telemedicine. This is across 28 projects in 72 communities. We're helping build 5 towers and over 500 miles of fiber. And our local governments and tribes are partnering, and this is aggregate because some ISPs are on multiple projects, but 136 ISPs. And then this is just a look at where those dollars have gone. Construction are the blue dots. So that's that 37.8 million. And the green dots come from our planning program, so a different pot of money, but just to show where we've done planning across the state. And then this is just a breakdown of the applicants who have received funding from CERB. So ports, PUDs are our 2 highest local jurisdictions who've received funding, but tribes are pretty high up there also. And so this is just a quick overview of direct benefits from CERB. That's what our proviso says we have to do: increase connectivity, modernize local economies, serve ongoing and growing needs of our community systems and online education opportunities. And then the community impacts are those ancillary benefits of broadband that we all know about. And so CERB's model is very similar to Port of Whitman. That's actually the model that we built it off of. So a community applies for funding from CERB. They get awarded low interest loan grant package. That community builds that infrastructure. An ISP rents or leases access to that infrastructure. And the ISP installs the equipment and provides retail service to the end user. And then the community uses that rent, quote unquote, payments from the ISP to pay back the CERB loan, but also to maintain that system going forward. And then ultimately, hopefully have enough revenue to continue building out further as they need to. And as I mentioned, CERB's model is a little bit different than our traditional infrastructure funders. We provide technical assistance or project development to the communities as from the idea stage all the way through the end. And then our applications are due 8 weeks prior to our meeting. Staff works with the client to vet the application and the project. The day of the board meeting, the applicant will present to the board and pitch their project, kind of like Shark Tank, but our goal is to get to yes. And then the applicant will know that day. So 8 weeks from applying, they'll know if their project is approved. And then we do track our projects for 5 years after completion, and what we'll report out to the legislators are our CERB investment, number of ISPs, internet speed, and then number of connections. And about 94% of our estimated connections will be at a gig at this time. So I won't go too much into this, but this is the project that Kara talked about at Port of Whitman over in Port of Garfield. When with their update that they gave us in April, they had several homes have been sold now that there's an option for telecommuting. The Garfield County Hospital is launching a telehealth cardiology program in addition to their other telehealth programs. Also, there's a benefit to emergency management of wildfires, providing a command center with ability to have mapping. And this allows students to do homework at home and not have to stay late at school. And this was phase 1. CERB has funded phase 2, and I believe PWB has taken it to the next phase. And that's all I got.
That's all you've got. That was fantastic. I have a couple questions.
Sure.
And an email popped up and they ran out of my head. So I'm going to go to the one someone messaged.
Okay.
There are many definitions of urban and rural. How does CERB define a rural county versus an urban one?
So we go by, I believe it's OFM who now does the definition. And so it's 100 persons per square mile, I believe is how they designate that for rural. And then there's less than 224 square miles. So then we get the island counties in there. And so we just go by the state for rural. So then we have determined rural communities in urban counties as a city or town less than 20,000. And then all federally recognized tribes in an urban county, we just consider rural as well.
So even if you're in technically a urban county, if you're in a rural community, you would still be able to apply for CERB.
Mm-hmm. Or another example is like Port of Bellingham. So Whatcom County is urban. Port of Bellingham is technically urban, but all of the areas that they're serving with CERB funding is unincorporated county or a rural community.
That's
So
fantastic.
an urban community could come to serve a rural and still be eligible.
That's great. I know that's been a really limiting factor for lots of communities to reach funding. So I really appreciate that you've made that distinction that, you know, you leave that I-5 corridor and things are very different, even though it's the same.
We know so much more than we did in 2018. And we actually have legislation that's being proposed that takes the rural out and will let the board determine how funding goes forward, because we know that there's pockets even in our urban communities on the I-5 corridor that are not being served. So how to be able to get every household and business connected is we can't have those limiting factors going forward. That's going to be our state goal.
That's fantastic. And I appreciate that you highlighted that homes are selling once they have a broadband connection. I mean, I know we're seeing on, you know, Zillow pictures of ONTs now. It's a really big deal for underserved communities to have their homes.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Janae. That was great information. All right, next we're going to hear from Ann Campbell from the Washington State Broadband Office, also representing the Public Works Board. Ann?
There we go. Sorry. Hi there. I was muted. I took an opportunity because I am a huge supporter of Janae and of CERB to copy the definition of rural out of the rural broadband policy book that CERB kindly has posted on their website and pasted it into the chat for the panelists. So if you want to share that, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with everyone today. I am Ann Campbell. I am the Washington State Broadband Office Infrastructure Programs Manager. I come to you in this role only having assumed it as of middle of October. Prior to that, I was working in affordable housing, and prior to that, I spent the last 10 years working for the Public Works Board and helping also to support CERB. Doing infrastructure funding, and I am thrilled to pieces to be back in local government. I am here today to present on the broadband office's funding opportunities, as well as to provide a very high level overview on the Public Works Board's recently finished funding round. And as soon as I can get my presentation slides under control, I will be happy to start doing that. Let's see here if I can get started with this. PowerPoint slideshow. Let's see if I can get that done. Okay, can you see the front page of the slideshow?
Right now we're seeing you. I don't know if your screen is shared yet.
Let's try that one. Let's try that one and hit share. How's that look?
There we go. But right now we're seeing your notes page as well, not your presentation screen.
All right, well, let's stop that and try the other one.
It's complicated when we have multiple screens.
Let's see here. Let's hit stop share. Let's try this again. And let's hit share this. How's that?
There it is. You got it.
Yay. Okay. So that's who I am. This is who I'm representing. Today is actually the 16th. Yay. Let's get this dog and pony show started. All righty. So moving right along, broadband project support model. This is ultimately what the broadband office would like to do. We would like very much to foster stakeholder collaboration to help our communities to project plan to get broadband out into the far reaches of the community to support everything that Janae has already touched on. That would be fiber to the home. That would be to support community anchor institutions such as our healthcare facilities, schools, law enforcement, and our community action agencies. That includes identifying where we have gaps in service. That includes identifying geographical challenges, terrain challenges. It also includes identifying socioeconomic challenges. We want to leverage local funding. We want to leverage that massive amount of federal funding that's coming our way. And we want to make sure that our initial investment options are leverageable for long-term scalability. So what we're able to achieve in the near term can potentially be scaled up so that we can achieve the state's broadband goals of 2028, which are 150 megabytes per second speeds, symmetrical. And that is a healthy goal that we have for 2028. And if I misspeak during this presentation, please bear with me. As I stated earlier, I have only started working in this arena in October. So, and here is where we are seeing the delivery gap. There is, of course, the return on investment. In the urban arenas, we have higher populations, we've got closer premises, so it's a pretty easy stretch. You build it in a fairly small footprint, you're able to achieve a lot of connections. We've already heard from a number of our providers about how it's a pretty easy return on investment. It's a fairly low monetary risk with a fairly high return on that, even when there aren't robust external resources on that. So what we're looking at now is reaching into those unserved and underserved areas in our suburban and rural areas. Now, I want to take a moment to speak to some economic impacts here. I'm not certain if everyone on this presentation are aware, but effective January 1, realtors and people selling their residences have to disclose as part of their standard disclosure statements their internet service provider and the rates of speeds that they have if it's known. Same as you have to identify your water source, whether it's a well, whether it's a local utility, whether it's a Class A system or a private well, your septic system, things of that nature. And I strongly suspect, like many other resources, that having internet availability is going to have a material impact on the price point of property values. And property values are already going up, but having a material impact of your internet service costs, or rather your internet service availability on your residents, and an increase on that will benefit the home sellers and will benefit the tax base of the communities themselves. So that's something to think about, moving forward.
And did you say that took effect on January 1st? That
will take effect January 1 of 2022.
I missed that. That's fantastic. And I'm curious what that's going to do.
Oh, yeah. I currently live in Mason County. I am not in PUD 3 territory. I'm in PUD 1 territory, but we are looking at buying a home in Lewis County. And because, like many other people, we have to work remotely, and we cannot buy a home that is in an area that does not have decent internet service. So we literally take our laptops with us when we go and look at homes. And wow. It is an absolute deal killer for us. So it's something that I'm not certain a lot of communities are aware of, and it will have a huge impact on their growth. And Janae spoke to it, and a couple of other people spoke to it in their presentations about how they are seeing very material impacts on their communities' growth rates with the advent of fiber in their communities.
Yeah, and luckily Lewis PUD is working on it, so that's good for that area. I do have one more question for you.
Absolutely.
What's the name of that doggy behind you?
Well, I have two. The one who is the lighter colored one is Cocoa Puff, and the darker colored one is Bubba Fluffums.
Oh my goodness, best name ever.
Yeah, they're just silly, all I can say. Anyway, nothing like getting showed up
Back
by
to the
kids.
topic at hand.
Yeah. So anyhow, so one of the things that always drives public investment, and it doesn't matter if it is broadband, it doesn't matter if it is water, it doesn't matter if it's sewer, it doesn't matter if it's paving the road, is demand. And we have the broadband speed test, the map that we have on access to on our website. And that is what you're seeing here. And currently it is, I don't believe it is live updating. I believe one of our staff is currently updating it by hand due to some technical challenges we're having. You gotta love it, technical challenges. But anyhow, you will see on the map areas that are driving the identification of what actual, and this is actual speed. This is the MLab speed, the actual speed that it takes to get to the internet from the home connection or from the connection point around our state. And you'll see a fair number of green spots where you'd expect to see them in the urban density areas, and a whole lot of red and a number of black spots where there's frankly no connectivity, or the connectivity is ridiculously low. The goal is, of course, is to put in and get as many of those reds flipped to greens and as many of those blacks flipped to green as you possibly can. Now, keep in mind, and I do feel the need to point this out to anyone who may be new to our state, there are large areas of our state that are national forest lands, national park lands, or are working timberland or working farmland. I would not expect to see test results from working timberland, working farmland, or national forest or national park areas. So just bear that in mind. All right, so moving along, what is the current status of funding in the broadband office? We have federal grant applications that we just closed the application window on at the tail end of November. We are currently reviewing those in-house, in addition to having a group of outside reviewers who is contributing to that review cycle. We will have those awards announced at the end of at the end of the month, rather, the 1st of January. We are currently awaiting the state's application to the NTIA. Originally, the NTIA application results were supposed to be announced in November, but much like everyone else, they were inundated with application requests. I think they've received more than $1 billion worth of requests for $400 million worth of funding availability. So they also asked for an extension. The NTIA results should be released in January. And last but not least, we have an open round of funding for federal matching grants, rather grants that we are awarding to provide matching funds for local governments who are seeking federal dollars. And those are not federal dollars that we are administering. Those are federal dollars that are being administered by a federal entity, such as the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or say the U.S. Department of Commerce, that's an entity. Those are available on our website, and they are open as of the 29th of November and are on a first come, first served basis. They are especially geared towards being the matching funds necessary to match the federal Reconnect grant program that is being administered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. That funding is open through, I believe, February 22nd. And future status. Today is the day that the governor announced his supplemental budget proposal. He has not made any changes to the broadband office funding other than to change the source of the funding that we were awarded during the capital budget for the biennium. As I stated earlier, we're still working on awarding those fall broadband grants, but the next round of funding for the broadband acceleration grants will be released. We'll be opening up solicitations for those, presumably in May. And I say presumably because we are waiting on additional federal guidance. Hold on just a second. Okay, there we go. We're waiting on guidance on the coronavirus capital projects or program funding from the feds. They've released some guidance, but they are still in the process of releasing guidance on that. I'm presuming that we will have sufficient guidance and the state will have access to those funds for us to be able to release an application round as of May of 2022. Now, the lead up to that application round will be different than the fall 2021 round. The lead up to the May 2022 round will include a technical assistance period. It will include webinars going over the application questions. It will include listening sessions and feedback sessions before that application round is released. I was not part of the creation of the fall 2021 round, and I like a fair amount of transparency when doing application rounds, as well as feedback and the opportunity for applicants to ask many questions and have a long period of time in which they can assemble their answers and responses to have a complete application package to submit. Then this summer is when I suspect we will be releasing applications for the federal funding that was just passed by Congress on the 6 new programs to be administered by the NTIA. Do I need to pause for questions?
No, not yet.
Okay, so there are 6 programs the NTIA is tasked with getting out the door: broadband equity access and deployment, enabling middle mile, broadband infrastructure, tribal broadband connectivity, digital equity acts, planning, equity capacity, and the equity competitive grants. And we'll go into some detail on those next. But I do want to point out, NTIA has 4 more listening sessions scheduled. I strongly recommend, if you are at all interested to participate in those listening sessions, you can register for them, or you can listen to the prior listening sessions. They're on their website to contribute to the development of those particular programs. They are incredibly informative, and NTIA is absolutely incorporating the feedback that they are getting. So I strongly recommend them. So the programs, the State Digital Equity Capacity Grant, there is a lot of there's a lot of interest in digital equity, and digital equity is broadly defined in the Federal Act. It is everything from access to having broadband access, to having fiber connectivity, to economic access. So it's not only that you don't have internet access at all, say you're in a rural area, but it's also economic access. So if you have a broadband bill that's say $80 a month, that's out of reach for a number of households in urban areas where that may be the standard pricing for a decent speed in a normal urban area. So they've got access to broadband, but they don't have the economic access. So they'd be underserved under that definition of equity. So there's a lot of interest in how to sort of bring that parity forward. So I suspect that that's going to develop further, but they also have additional program funds that have expanded and changed up the EBB program, and we'll speak more to that here in a moment. They have the Digital Equity Competitive Program that has billions of dollars involved in that, and it also is supporting that building of that bridge to manage that digital divide. Let's see here, we have the deployment of the state grants, we have the building of the middle mile, and then changing up that EBB program through the broadband affordability and the reconnect funding. And then last but certainly not least is more than $2 billion for the tribal connectivity program. So all of these 6 programs Gotta love the numbering. Sorry, I just realized that was backwards. All of these 6 programs, NTIA is tasked with developing guidelines and parameters for between now and June, I believe, of 2022. So those listening sessions that I referred to earlier are part of their process in developing those programs and the guidance that they're tasked with releasing next spring. Once they've released that guidance and they've started identifying how much funding each state will receive in the formula grants and how much each state will have the ability to compete for, that's when we, as Washington State, will know, okay, this is how much we'll be able to put out for competition, or how much we'll be able to just line item assign to the eligible entities moving forward. But right now, we just don't know enough to be able to say this is how much we'll be able to invest in our communities and how. So in a nutshell, all of what I just referred to is we have 25 million in matching grants that's available now, primarily for the Reconnect program, or to help support the Reconnect program, but is also available for other federal funds, or to help support and provide matching dollars for other federal funds that are administered by federal programs. We have infrastructure acceleration grants that we will be releasing in May of 2022, and the federal infrastructure, the IIJA Act that just got released, and to stay tuned on the actual dollar amount that will end up being. So, and with that, I will pause on the broadband office presentation before I segue into the Public Works Board update for any questions on the broadband stuff.
I haven't seen any questions come in, but I'm going to repeat it because it was such a valuable point to join in on those NTIA listening sessions. I found that to be true, that they really do listen to the feedback they receive, and it gets integrated into the programs. So help make the programs better, let them know what your needs are.
Absolutely. And they are recorded. So even if you aren't able to participate in real time, you can always put them on while you are fixing dinner or, I don't know, folding laundry.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, we're ready to hear the Public Works Board information.
All righty. So exciting news. They have just finished awarding approximately $44.7 million in funding just earlier this month. Those are conditional awards, and they're only conditional because at this point in time, the funding that the Public Works Board was appropriated by the legislature is the Coronavirus Capital Program funding. And the federal government requires that the state of Washington submit a plan that is then vetted through 2 different processes. And the federal government did not actually release instructions on how to actually submit those plans until September. And it's going to take a while for that process to work its way through. I'm happy to report, however, that the governor's supplemental budget that he released today has him doing a funding swap, so that the type of funds that the Public Works Board is given it changes it up so that that delay could be changed up. So if that proposal is passed by the legislature, then that delay will be removed. So that's very exciting news. But these are the projects that the board just has recently approved, which is very exciting. The remaining projects were unable to be funded either due to lack of funding. The board simply didn't have enough funds to move forward, or that the projects were challenged by a local service provider under the Public Works Board's challenge rules and were found to be credible objections. Now, I want to point out that a number of these projects also are seeking funding from the Washington State Broadband office in our current funding round, and we have slightly different challenge rules. So a project that is challenged under the Public Works Board that was successful may also have submitted for funding under the Broadband office, and they may also be challenged under the Broadband office, but that challenge may not be successful because our rules are slightly different. If that's the case, I am still going to strongly encourage that the applicant and the challenging party work together to find a consensus that both parties can work through for a successful outcome. Because the ultimate result that I want is that broadband is brought forward in the community at a speed that is inherent or is desired in the state's broadband goals. That is the ultimate goal. How we get there is negotiable, but the ultimate goal is to get that 150 symmetrical by 2028. So, anyhow.
And we had a
Yes.
question come up on this award schedule.
Yes.
We see the City of Tukwila CBRS application scored a 0. Do you have any insight into what the issue was there?
Yes, as you'll notice on the far left-hand side, there is a column that says below threshold. What that means is that there are a certain level of criteria that every single project must meet in order to be reviewed for scoring. That's called a threshold criteria. And basic threshold, and I haven't vetted the Public Works Board application criteria to know precisely what their threshold criteria are, but basic threshold criteria are, it's an eligible applicant, that the funding that is being sought is at or below the maximum amount of funding being sought, that the project elements are eligible activities under the type of projects to be funded, that sort of thing. So I don't know anything about the City of Tukwila request, but some part of that project was deemed to not have passed the threshold review.
Okay. So maybe, will there be any more insight into how the scoring was developed?
I would strongly recommend that if anyone has any questions about the scoring criteria, methodology, or would like a debrief on their particular project, that they contact Sheila Richardson, who is the Broadband Program Manager for the Public Works Board, and her contact information is at the end of this slide.
Perfect. And she's a fantastic person to boot.
She is phenomenal. And she is on a much deserved vacation right now, which is why I am doing the presentation.
Yes, she's in Hawaii, lucky girl, or lucky woman, excuse me.
Exactly. Hopefully it stopped raining. So this is the basic information. The Public Works Board will be opening another competitive cycle this coming spring, much like the Office of Broadband will be doing. I will be working very closely with Sheila and the Public Works Board to align our application cycles to mutually benefit both programs and our clients, and the funds for Public Works Board will be available in fiscal year 2022. So that's state fiscal year 2022. And that means in time, anytime before June of 2022. And so that would be $7 million. And the eligible applicants are those who are listed on the screen. And I strongly suspect that the greater amount of details will be available come this spring. And last but not least, here is Sheila's contact information.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Is that the end of the presentation?
That is the end of the presentation. And I thank you for the opportunity, and I apologize for having less detail, but I want to double down on everything that Janae shared as far as the outcomes are concerned. Broadband may not be directly life-saving in the way that potable water is life-saving, but it is absolutely indirectly life-saving insofar as having a viable 911 program, having telehealth, having access to your loved ones during a time of a pandemic. And I am thrilled to pieces to be part of the office that is going to help make that happen for many people.
Well, easy, and you're starting to steal my presentation now.
Hey, That's why I got hired for this role. I firmly believe that infrastructure is a very unsung hero, and I think that everybody who's participating in this session should be wearing capes and crowns.
Well, I'm grateful personally that we're getting there with broadband, as just really we're getting to it as a utility infrastructure versus you know, just something fun to watch Netflix on. The importance is really starting to be felt and understood. All right, our next and final presenter for this panel is Andrew Henshaw from Learn, Design, Apply, and he is a grant expert. So take it away, Andrew.
All right, I'm going to share my slides here. So as Claire just mentioned, my name is Andrew Henshaw. I also go by Andy. I'm the Director of Business Development for Learn, Design, Apply, and I've been working with the state of Washington and with NOAANet to essentially make grant services available to hopefully anyone who can apply and is eligible to apply for grant funding, both at the state and federal level. There's been a lot of, as you guys know, a lot of federal stimulus money coming down the pike, and that's either filtered into nationally competitive programs that we can assist with, or into federal to state funds, and then that's distributed accordingly. And you've seen a lot of those slides explaining just how that funding is going to manifest into various programs and you know, opportunities for you to build out infrastructure. So in a nutshell, who we are, we're a grant consulting and management company with about 20 plus years being in existence in one form or another. I kind of grew up doing grants, so this is something that my mother has started as a business, and you know, I've just kind of fallen into that fashion of just understanding what makes a good grant just by being around it. I think probably the best example I could give is building binders for grants when you had to mail them in. That was a part of my life when I was like 12 or 13 years old, until they, you know, finally made it more acceptable to post your submissions online for this sort of funding. What we do is track the legislation, the funding and trends, basically just following the money in a nutshell. We read through those big 2,700 page infrastructure bill documents and derive everything that's going to be important to you as potential applicants for the funding. Much like we're doing now, we're creating awareness and educating potential applicants on that funding. And then trying to establish a pre-qualification process to let you know if you want to speak with us at any time, we can work with you in a one-on-one format to talk about how qualified your organization and your area will be for particular types of either national or state-based funding, giving you the best opportunity to diversify your risk, maybe applying for multiple applications, or potentially just choosing the most competitive program for your proposed funded service area and your organization. So when I started kind of developing these slides and was really thinking, what makes your grant application competitive and what is going to set you up for success? I think knowing first where you want to apply is a great first step. You have plenty of archive documentation that you can pull out on an as-needed basis for any particular program, but defining where you want to implement is really going to help you define, much like Ann was mentioning, all of those different whys. Why are you applying for funding here? Is it super rural? Is it an affordability issue? Do you need access to just Netflix, or do you want telehealth, education opportunities, workforce development opportunities, or even public safety? What's going to be solved by adding broadband? Because you need more than just, we want broadband. So starting with creating the proposed funded service area is a great step. And Ann's team, along with many different groups in the state of Washington, could potentially help your organization, if you don't have those internal capabilities, to determine what sort of service levels you currently have, how those match up with the requirements of the program, and how competitive you might be according to the guidelines that they put forth for that federal or state program. And my best advice in that regard is to err on the side of caution. There have been quite a few applications that I've seen where you're trying to toe that line of 90% served or 100% unserved, and it gets rejected on a technicality. You're just 89% unserved, not 90%. And unfortunately, they just cannot even score your application and give you an idea of how competitive it would have been because you've already hit that technical rejection. So I say, give it a little bit of an overlap, make sure 100% sure that you're providing the right information and that you won't get kicked out on that technicality. My favorite part personally is telling the story of need. And I think, from what we've heard from various USDA general field reps, evaluators, and now even at the NTIA as they're ramping up new and novel broadband infrastructure and digital equity programs, they really want to know that why. They can observe whether you're going to be operationally and financially sustainable as a project and as an entity sustaining that project, just with numbers, figures, ratios, but they want to see the why. They want to make sure that they're understanding exactly how rural you are, exactly how far you have to drive to get to the medical clinic that's closest to you, what kind of services are provided at that medical clinic, and if you need more as an individual. And so I typically start these discussions with groups talking about demographic information. It's something that's taken at the federal level. You can use census-based data. You can use countyhealthrankings.org to get an idea of what the population is, the population density, so persons per square mile. The poverty rates are gonna correlate really well with economic development need, and perhaps the affordability issues that you encounter. In high poverty areas, it's tougher to build out as a private company infrastructure in these areas because you're worried about people actually subscribing to your service once you connect to homes. And that's where grant money could really kind of factor in and provide that that buffer, that a private company might need. I mean, similar for electric public utility districts, really anyone who needs to cover that high cost sort of expenditure to connect these homes. They want to know exactly what they're running into in terms of problems, whether it's the affordability or if it's just too darn expensive to build out $100,000 per mile for approximately 6 people per square mile. So you can start there. What we have noticed as well for the demographic information is that a lot of the new funding, especially through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, is going to be very focused on minority majority communities and traditionally underserved or disenfranchised communities. So if you can factor in, if you're serving a high minority community, if you're serving anchor institutions that identify as Hispanic serving institutions, minority serving institutions, HBCUs, and so on, or serve, you're providing service to veterans and disabled populations that really will have a much more difficult time accessing education, healthcare, and whatever it may be. And broadband might, really benefit their lives. You're going to want to factor in those variables and then start overlapping the story of, anecdotal information. Who is a particular person that you could point to who would want to give you their first person perspective about, being a disabled veteran in rural America? How far do they have to travel to get to a VA appointment? And would that be made better? Could they reduce a 95-minute drive each way by getting on a telehealth visit and using Zoom or some other video platform with reliable internet to get their healthcare or mental health care taken care of? I've even heard use cases of teledentistry through University of Washington, expanding through the entirety of Washington State and into Oregon, where they're actually able to do pre-examinations with video conferencing equipment to determine whether you need to come in or if it's just a minor issue that can be repaired in some other way.
Romeo, come
here. So then you can move on again to the specific issues. So, some other big topics that we've heard that might start the conversation for you. The homework gap. I mean, if you consider being a student in the pandemic, having to deal with social distancing, I know that's kind of subsided to some degree, but if there's a COVID spike, Omicron is coming around, who knows what the regulations will be per school. But if you're stuck at home without internet and you have to go pick up a homework packet that's 30 minutes away, or you have to drive to a library at 8 p.m. once your parents get home from work just to complete your homework in the car with a hotspot or with the Wi-Fi from the library, it could be made better by access to just reliable infrastructure where you can get that at your home. It leads to better educational outcomes. Learning loss is a big issue along with homework gap. Healthcare access, I've been through workforce development opportunities. I mean, Anne, you could probably explain this far better than I can because that's your life, but are jobs harder to find? Can you possibly move from an urban area to a rural area that you would enjoy more quality of life by having access to that infrastructure. Will that draw businesses to the area? Big topic across the country is gig cities. If you can build it, more businesses will want to be there. They want to be able to do cloud computing, which you can't do on a 10-1 connection. So, if you can think about the ways in which people will be attracted to your area, and local workers can possibly work from home or access opportunities that aren't immediately available in the area, and retain their income or supplement their income by working out of the home. And then looking at outward migration, and this is something that isn't necessarily observed by NTIA that we've seen. They don't mention it directly, but USDA is very concerned about outward migration and kind of this spiraling effect of more people leave, there's less cash in the economy, more businesses close down, and more people leave. And so you want to talk about how potentially providing these services, whether they're remote or physical, can slow that or completely eradicate the outward migration effect. So again, I think that's the most important slide. If you take anything away from what I'm saying, please just pay attention to this slide and really just start talking about it. Think about the why. Ask why do we need broadband? And chances are, if you speak to people in your community, they'll give you a few answers as to why.
All right, everybody. Oh, Andrew, go back real quick if you wouldn't mind. Everybody screenshot.
Hey, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Or rather make an observation. So Andrew, on that median household income bullet point you have there on the demographic information, pay very close attention when you are filling out or providing information on the source of that median household income that you're using. Depending on who is doing the funding announcement, they may have a different median household income that they're reference that they're using. I know of about 7 different ones that are used across the spectrum.
Yep, excellent point. I think I've seen some that request the ACS 5-year average, some that are requesting county level median household income and poverty rates rather than the specific municipality you might want to serve. Yeah, you're very, very much on point there. Don't get tricked. I think that's another sort of value add that we provide, and you guys can reach out to us at any time. If you want to just have us make sure that you're covering all your bases and using the correct information, that's something we would like to provide for you at any time. Everybody get their screenshot? Do a slow count to 10.
You're looking good. Yeah, thank you so much for going back for a second.
Sure, of course. And I'll send these over to you, Claire, as well, if you want to distribute them.
Perfect, thank you.
In terms of next steps, once you think about the why, start gathering some of these bits and pieces of documentation that are very common across multiple different grant application types. And it's something you should have in your archives already. If it's not an issue to keep it in kind of like a grants folder, I would highly recommend getting together your articles of incorporation. You probably don't need the certified copy of bylaws anymore, but a copy of your bylaws would be helpful to have because a lot of these applications will ask for it. Some previous years of financials, if you have them available again. And I know each grants, you're not going to be able to time grants perfectly with your financials being published. So just taking into account, the ability to factor in historicals, kind of a gap year where you're applying and your estimate of what the rest of that year will look like. And then starting to look toward that 5-year projection and really starting to think hard about with the incorporation of this project, how will that affect my cash availability? How might that affect my debt to service coverage? And that's not for just one person to figure out. You're going to want to have a pretty solid project team created out of that. Looking at a list of debt obligations that you might have, keeping that all ready to go, having the amortization schedules ready, because a lot of that will be required when you're talking about your various financial projections and how that might impact the rest of the business. And then looking at where you are currently. I think most organizations that we've spoken to, who we've assisted with applications, typically have a team that could either mock one of these very high level network diagrams up, or they already have it created and are ready to kind of repurpose that to talk about the new proposed funded service area that they intend to expand to. And then of course the current speed offerings. and prices associated with them. And I think this is my last slide on just things to create, things that will very commonly be requested amongst different grant applications in one form or another. They may not exactly be these line item descriptions, but if you can talk about your history, how long have you been a company? What sort of types of equipment and technologies are you familiar with? Are you expanding through this project to doing aerial fiber when you've only done underground or fixed wireless? Think about what you're changing or if you're staying consistent. It will matter to the evaluators to know if this is a high risk project or medium or just more of the same thing that you know how to do for the last 35 years. Looking at how your organization fits in with any parent companies or subsidiaries. Of course, any associated company that might affect your finances, they'll want to know about. And then, yeah, just looking at the key management resumes. Who's going to be involved in your project? What is their work history? How does everyone work together in this grant application and within the business on a daily basis to make sure that this is going to go off without a hitch? You're going to be able to do this on time and on budget. And then this is my last slide because I had like 20 more that was talking about funding, but Ann covered all of it. But I noticed this one was missing. I wanted to make sure that everybody saw this in case you have any Huawei or ZTE communications equipment and services. This application is still open through January 14th. And I don't know how to apply to it, but I thought it was very important that they have about $2 billion available. And if you need help replacing, removal, disposal, or installation of new equipment because of the Huawei and ZTE issues, there's a reimbursement program, and it targets rural telecoms with less than 10 million customers. So I just wanted to make sure that was known. Again, if you want to take a screenshot, I'll send these slides over to Claire. I think it would be helpful to at least explore that up until January 14th. I don't believe it to be a 50-page application. I think it's more of a request for reimbursement type deal. Won't be as heavily involved as like an NTIA or a USDA application. So that's all I have for my presentation. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask, and we'll either reference them through the chat or however you wish.
Perfect. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. Is there a fairly straightforward way to determine who in Washington would be eligible for that? Was that FCC reimbursement funding geared toward actual ISPs?
Yes, rural telecom providers under 10 million customers. Okay.
Okay, perfect. So I don't have any other questions that have come in for you. Thank you so much. That was really helpful. I hope everyone also screenshotted that slide of the organizational information, because those are great assets to get writing on before opportunities come up, so you can just plug them in and spend your time on the technical things.
And I think probably what I would like to do in the near future, because there is so much funding coming out next year, and we want to make sure that all of Washington is able to kind of hold on to something as an example, take some bits and pieces of truths from different applications and kind of create a mock-up. So we're not exposing someone's entire previously funded application, but just making sure that you have an example that you can work off of to get the context and understanding. If you do want to write it yourself, or you can reach out to us and see how we might be able to help you either with reviewing and editing, full writing, project management, whatever that may be.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
All right.